My name is Elias Vance, and if you're watching this, then the whispering woods of Blackwater, Oregon have let me go. But I don't think they're done. Not by a long shot. They're just waiting for the next curious soul, the next set of headlights to pull over on that lonely stretch of Route 7, maybe that SU. So before you decide to stargaze on a forgotten road, listen to my story and ask yourself, would you have turned back when you had the chance? The first thing we saw was the shoe. It lay in the beam of our high-powered LED light, a single, scuffed-up hiking boot caked in dried mud, its laces neatly tied. It was just sitting there, perfectly upright, in the middle of a path that shouldn't have existed. Behind it, the woods of Blackwater National Forest were a wall of impenetrable darkness, so silent it felt like the world was holding its breath. Jake Gibraltar Gibbons, our team's skeptic and sound guy, had vanished over 20 minutes ago. This boot was the first sign we'd found of him since the screaming stopped. My cameraman, Leo, panned the light away from the boot, his hands shaking so hard the beam jutted across the pine trees. Elias, man, we need to go back, now. But going back was the problem. We'd been trying to go back for what felt like hours, only to end up right here, in this same clearing, with this same damnably patient boot waiting for us. We were lost in a way that GPS or a compass couldn't explain. We were trapped in a story the old-timers in the diner back in town warned us about. A story we, as professional paranormal investigators for our YouTube channel, Static Truth, had been arrogant enough to think we could debunk. It all started with the stars. 2 nights ago, we were driving back from a dead-end investigation at the abandoned Blackwell Asylum. Another bust. Another video full of forced excitement and fabricated chills. I was behind the wheel of our van, the Truthmobile, with Leo snoring in the passenger seat. Jake was in the back, already editing footage on his laptop, the blue glow lighting his frustrated face. Nothing, he'd grumbled. Not a single EVP worth a damn. Our subscribers are gonna roast us alive. That's when I saw them. The stars over the stretch of Route 7 that cuts through Blackwater Forest. Without a single town light for miles, the night sky was a dizzying spill of diamonds. The Milky Way, a thick, luminous brushstroke across the velvet black. A crazy idea took hold. "Guys," I said, slowing the van, "look at that." Leo stirred, blinking. "Whoa, we need a shot of that," I said, my producer's brain already scripting the voiceover. Sometimes the greatest mysteries aren't in haunted asylums, but above us in the infinite cosmos. It would be a beautiful philosophical opener for our failed episode. A saving grace. "Pull over," Leo agreed, already reaching for his main camera. Jake leaned forward. Guys, it's 2 in the morning. This is Creepshow Central. The stories about these woods are exactly that, Jake. Stories, I said, steering the van onto a narrow gravel pull-off barely visible in the headlights. Legends to scare kids. We investigate this stuff, remember. We're not supposed to be scared of it. I killed the engine. The silence was immediate and absolute. It was the kind of quiet that has weight, that presses in on your eardrums. We got out, the cold night air biting through our jackets. Leo set up his tripod on the gravel, aiming it at the spectacular celestial display. I pulled out my DSLR to take some stills. That's when we heard it. Not from the sky, from the woods. A chorus of coyotes, but it was wrong. It wasn't the normal yipping howl we were used to. This was sharper, more frantic, almost panicked. And it was close. A dozen of them at least, their cries weaving together into a single, terrifying shriek that seemed to be moving toward the road. My heart hammered against my ribs. Okay, that's intense. Leo kept filming, switching to night vision. This is better than the stars. Jake stood by the van, not moving. His face, lit by the moon, was pale. Elias, get in the van. Let's go. Are you kidding? This is gold, I said, the adrenaline of a potential discovery overriding a deeper primal fear. This is what we came for. No, we came for the asylum. This is something else. This feels wrong. The coyotes fell silent. The ensuing quiet was even worse. It was a listening silence. I laughed, a nervous, brittle sound. Don't tell me the great Jake Gibbons is spooked by a few puppies. He didn't smile. Just get in the van, man. Fine. We'd gotten enough. I walked back to the driver's side door. All right, pack it up, Leo. Let's head to the motel. I slid the key into the ignition and turned it. Click. The engine didn't even cough. It was a dead, hollow sound. I tried again. Click. Nothing. Leo lowered his camera. What's wrong? I don't know. I popped the hood. The three of us stared at the engine block, illuminated by the phone flashlights. Everything looked normal. No loose wires, no obvious problems. The Truthmobile was a tank. It had never failed us. That's when I checked my phone. No service. Leo and Jake checked theirs. Same. We were stranded. No engine, no signal. Just us, the van, and a forest that had suddenly gone preternaturally still. Okay, I said, trying to sound like the leader I was supposed to be. Okay, we're investigators. We don't panic. We assess. Jake pointed a trembling finger at the dark wall of trees. We assess from inside the van, with the doors locked. And do what? Wait for a sunrise that's 5 hours away? I shook my head. The coyotes. That sound. There's a story here. Maybe this is why we really came. Leo, ever the pragmatist, chimed in. Jake's right, Elias. It's not safe. But my camera battery's almost dead. The spare is in my main bag in the back. If we're gonna be stuck here, we should have a working camera, Jake volunteered instantly. I'll get it. 2 minutes. He was clearly desperate for any task that wasn't just waiting. He grabbed a flashlight from the van and trudged back toward the rear doors. Leo and I stood by the hood, the beam of my phone light creating a small, pathetic pool of safety in the vast dark. You got a light, Elias? Jake called out from behind the van. This one's dying. I pulled a Zippo from my pocket, a bad habit I'd never kicked, and lit it. The small flame did little to push back the dark. Jake came back around, lit a cigarette from the flame, and took a deep drag. Okay, be right back. He turned and walked back the way he'd come, his figure swallowed by the shadows between the van and the tree line. We heard his footsteps on the gravel, then the crunch of pine needles. Then nothing. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Jake? I called out, my voice too loud in the silence. No answer. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. Jake, this isn't funny. Leo had his camera up again, the red recording light a cyclops eye in the dark. Where did he go? It's 20 feet to the back of the van. We walked around to the rear. The doors were closed. Jake's bag was still inside. There was no sign of him. It was as if the forest had simply opened up and taken him. That's when the real terror began. The investigation was no longer a game. It was a rescue mission, and we were hopelessly, terrifyingly unprepared. Leo and I, armed with nothing but our high-power film light and a rising tide of dread, stepped off the gravel pull-off and into the woods. That first step into the Blackwater Forest, it's a feeling I can't describe. It's like stepping through a curtain into a colder, darker world. If you've ever stood at the edge of a dark basement staircase, feeling that pull of fear, then you know. That's what it was like. But could you have taken that step? If your friend was out there, you tell me. Stick with me. The deeper we go, the darker this gets. The woods were wrong. That was the only word for it. The air was too still. The scent of pine and damp earth somehow stale. Our footsteps were muffled, as if the ground was absorbing the sound. We called Jake's name until our voices were hoarse, but our shouts fell flat, deadened after a few feet. We found a path, a narrow, winding trail that wasn't on any map. We followed it, our light cutting a swath through the gloom. That's when we found the first sign, a fresh cigarette butt still glowing faintly, Jake's brand. "He came this way," Leo whispered, his voice cracking. We pressed on, the path twisting and turning in illogical ways. We'd walk for what felt like 10 minutes, only to see the same distinctive, lightning-struck pine tree up ahead. We were walking in a circle, but the compass on my phone, useless for a signal but still functioning, told me we were heading in a straight line due north. The fear was a physical thing now, a cold sweat on my skin, a metallic taste in my mouth. Leo's breathing was ragged. He was the believer, the one who genuinely thought every creak was a spirit. Now faced with something truly unexplainable, his faith in the paranormal was crumbling into sheer, undiluted panic. I was the skeptic, the anchor, but my skepticism was a dam about to break. "It's okay, Leo, we're just disoriented. We'll find him." That's when we heard the bouncing. It was faint at first, then clearer, the distinct rhythmic thump, thump, thump of a ball being dribbled on hard dirt, a basketball in the middle of the forest at 2:30 in the morning. Leo swung the light toward the sound. The beam illuminated a small, overgrown clearing. In the center stood the rusted skeleton of a children's basketball hoop, its net long gone, its backboard splintered. And beneath it, a shadowy figure dribbled a ball that was little more than a dark orb. "Jake!" I called out, a desperate hope surging in me. The dribbling stopped. The figure turned. It wasn't Jake. It was a young man, maybe in his 20s, dressed in a high school letterman's jacket from decades ago. His face was pale and waxy, his eyes empty pits. He smiled, a wide, unnatural grin, and held the ball out to us. Then he was gone. Not like he ran away, he simply dissolved into the shadows. The basketball hung in the air for a second before dropping to the ground with a soft thud and rolling away into the darkness. Leo made a choked sound. "What the hell was that, Elias? What the actual hell?" I had no answer. My mind was reeling. We were seeing things. We had to be. Fatigue, stress, carbon monoxide poisoning from the van. Anything was better than the alternative. We stumbled away from the clearing, our hearts pounding. We ran, branches whipping at our faces, until we burst into another small clearing. And there it was again, the same lightning-struck pine. We were right back where we started. That's when we saw the shoe, Jake's boot, sitting there waiting. You ever have that nightmare? The one where you're running but you're not going anywhere? The scenery just repeats itself over and over. That's not just a dream, it's a real place. It's in the Blackwater Forest. And when you see a familiar object, something that belongs to someone you love, just sitting there in the dark, that's when you know you're not just lost. You're caught. Don't look away. What we found next, it changes everything. Hopelessness set in. We sat on the cold ground, our backs against the lightning-struck tree, too exhausted and terrified to move. The forest seemed to be playing with us, showing us glimpses of its trapped inhabitants. We heard snippets of big band music, saw the flicker of old-fashioned car headlights between the trees, smelled the faint aroma of apple pie where no oven could possibly be. This forest wasn't just haunted by one ghost. It was a patchwork quilt of lost moments, of tragedies and vanishings that stretched back a century. The local legend we'd scoffed at in the diner was true. Blackwater Forest was a place where time and space frayed at the edges, a place that swallowed people and never let them go, recycling their final moments for eternity. Leo was sobbing quietly. "We're gonna die here, Elias. We're gonna end up like that guy with the ball." "No," I said, the word feeling hollow. "We're not. There has to be a way out." That's when I remembered something Jake had said back at the van, right before he vanished. He'd been muttering about local folklore, about an old Native American belief the waitress had mentioned. She'd said the land here was thin, and that to escape its pull, you had to break the cycle. You had to do something it didn't expect. You had to stop following the paths it laid out for you. The path, Leo, I whispered, grabbing his arm. We keep following the path because it's the only logical thing to do. But the forest is the path. It's leading us in circles because it wants us to. So what do? Walk through the trees? It's impossible. No, we go back, not along the path. We go back the way we came, in a straight line. We ignore the trail. We walk through whatever is in our way. It was a desperate, crazy plan, but it was the only one we had. We stood up, turned our backs on the path, and aimed our light directly into the thick, snarled undergrowth. We started walking, pushing through thorny bushes, scrambling over fallen logs. It was brutal, exhausting work. Branches scratched our faces and hands. We fell again and again. But after what felt like an eternity of struggle, we saw a glint of metal through the trees, the Truthmobile. We burst out of the tree line, weeping with relief, stumbling onto the gravel pull-off. The sky was beginning to lighten to a deep, pre-dawn grey. And there, sitting on the ground, leaning against the front tire of the van, was Jake. He was alive. He was shivering, his clothes torn, but he was whole. He looked up at us, his eyes wide with a terror I'll never forget. "Elias, Leo," he stammered. "You won't believe me." "We will, Jake," I said, dropping to my knees beside him. "We saw things too." "No," he said, shaking his head violently. "You don't understand. I've been here the whole time." "What?" "I went to get the battery from the back of the van. I heard you guys talking by the hood. I turned around to come back, and you were gone. The van was gone. The road was gone. I was just in the woods. I heard you calling my name, but your voices were coming from everywhere at once. I saw you sometimes. I'd see you both walking on a path, and I'd run toward you screaming, but you'd just fade away, like I was the ghost." A cold realization washed over me. We hadn't been searching for Jake. We'd been wandering through our own personal hell while he was trapped in his, just feet away from us, separated by a veil we couldn't see or cross. The forest hadn't just trapped us physically, it had trapped us in our own perceptions, feeding on our fear, our desperation to find each other. As the sun finally broke over the horizon, flooding the world with weak grey light, I looked back at my keys in my hand. A crazy thought occurred to me. I walked to the driver's side door, slid in, and turned the key. The Truthmobile roared to life immediately. The engine purred like a contented cat. On the dashboard, my phone chirped, suddenly showing full service bars. We drove away from Blackwater in a stunned silence. We didn't speak for 100 miles. We never uploaded the footage from that night. Leo refused to even look at it. Jake quit the channel and moved back to his hometown, refusing to ever talk about the paranormal again. Static truth faded into obscurity. But I kept the memory card. Sometimes, late at night, when the house is too quiet, I'll plug it into my computer. I'll fast forward through the hours of shaky, terror-filled footage. I'll see the basketball player, the old car lights, the repeating paths. And right at the end, just before we found Jake, there's a shot Leo took when he fell. The camera points up into the canopy of trees. And if you pause it, if you zoom in and enhance the darkness between the branches, you can just make them out. Dozens of pale, waxy faces looking down at us. Not with malice, not with hunger, but with a profound, bottomless loneliness. They're still there, waiting for company. The woods of Blackwater don't create monsters. They just reflect back what's already there. Our fear, our guilt, our need to find our way home. And they're always open for visitors. So the next time you're driving on a lonely highway at night and you see a pull-off leading into a dark stretch of woods, maybe just keep driving. Enjoy the stars from your rearview mirror. But if you did feel a chill, if this story made you double-check the locks on your doors, then you understand. The channel may be gone, but the static remains. If you survived this story, share it with someone you trust, but maybe don't watch it alone. Sweet dreams. The last thing Sarah saw before the flame died was the date scratched into the wooden bed frame. October 31st, 1998, the night it happened. Then the matchstick burned her fingers, and the darkness rushed back in, thicker and heavier than before. It wasn't supposed to be like this. 4 hours ago, we were laughing. 4 hours ago, this was just a stupid dare. My name is Chloe, and this is the story of why Blackwood College sealed the 5th floor of Hemlock Hall forever. They told us it was for asbestos removal. They told our parents it was structural issues. They lied. The truth is, they sealed it to keep what's inside from getting out. And tonight, on the 20th anniversary of the fire, we broke the seal. It started with a story, the kind passed down from senior to freshman during orientation week, the story of the Sigma sisters. In 1998, on Halloween night, the 5 sisters of Tri-Sig were throwing their legendary annual party right here in their 5th floor dorm suite. The rule was strict, no candles. The old building was a tinderbox, but one of them, a girl named Lily, was stressed about her midterms. After the party died down, she lit a small candle to study by, figuring everyone was asleep. She dozed off. The candle tipped. The curtains went up like a sheet of newspaper. The fire alarms had been disconnected for weeks. A prank gone wrong nobody had reported. By the time anyone smelled smoke, it was too late. 4 of the sisters made it out, scrambling down the smoke-filled hallway. Lily never did. They found her curled under her desk, the only place the flames hadn't fully reached. After that, the 5th floor was closed. Not just the room, the entire floor. The official story was damage, but the whispers said something else, that the 4 surviving sisters, racked with guilt, refused to ever speak of it again. That strange sounds, sobbing, the smell of smoke, the faint scent of blown-out candles, echoed from behind the newly erected drywall barrier. That on every Halloween since, a single fresh lily appears taped to the sealed doorway. My roommate Sarah, the history buff and believer in all things ghostly, had been obsessed with the story since day one. "It's not just a ghost story, Chloe," she'd say, her eyes wide. "It's a tragedy. They just walled her away, like she was garbage." Mark, Sarah's boyfriend and the campus skeptic, would just roll his eyes. "Come on, babe, it's a mold infestation. The lily is some goth kid's idea of a joke. It's not a ghost, it's a fungus." And then there was me, the practical one, the pre-med student who believed in facts, cells, and chemical reactions, not ghosts. And our 4th, Jake, the film major who lived for drama and was secretly in love with Sarah. He was the secret holder, the one who knew things about the campus others didn't. The one who found the old blueprints that showed a maintenance hatch behind a panel in the 4th floor laundry room, a way around the seal. "It's the 20th anniversary," Jake said that afternoon, a wild gleam in his eye. "The energy will be peak. We have to go. For my documentary." He always had his camera, a permanent extension of his arm. "That's a hard no," I said, not looking up from my biology textbook. "That's not just trespassing. That's breaking into a condemned space. We could get expelled." "Live a little, Chloe," Mark teased, slinging an arm around Sarah. "What's the matter, scared of a little dust?" That's how they got me. Not with the promise of a thrill, but with the threat of being labeled the coward. So, at 1 a.m. on Halloween night, with the rest of the campus drunk on cheap beer and nostalgia, the 4 of us stood in the silent, humming laundry room, staring at a loose wall panel. You know that feeling, right? When your gut is screaming no, but your pride is shoving you forward. That cold sweat on the back of your neck, that voice in your head telling you to turn around, go back to your room, lock the door. That's the feeling you should always listen to. But if we had, you wouldn't be hearing this story. And the thing is, some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. Jake pried the panel open with a crowbar. A gust of air sighed out of the darkness. It was cold and carried a faint, sweet smell, like old perfume and something else, something charred. Told you, Sarah whispered, her voice trembling with excitement. It's her, Lily's signature scent, gardenia perfume. The police report mentioned it. It's mildew, Sarah, Mark said, but his usual confidence was gone. The air was too cold, too still. We climbed through one by one. We found ourselves not in a hallway, but in a narrow maintenance corridor, pipes groaning around us. Our flashlight beams cut through a dust so thick it looked like fog. The silence was absolute. The distant thump of a dorm party 4 floors below didn't exist here. It was a tomb. We followed the corridor until it opened onto the 5th floor hallway. It was a time capsule. Faded posters for a 1998 Nirvana tour clung to the cinderblock walls. The floor was littered with debris, but it was pristine in its abandonment. And at the far end, a single door marked 505, the Tri-Sig suite. The door was unlocked. "This is it," Jake breathed, his camera light illuminating the dusty brass numbers. We stepped inside. The suite was frozen. 2 bedrooms branched off a common area with rotting couches. Everything was coated in a grey film. On a coffee table, 4 mugs sat, their contents long since evaporated, leaving dark rings. It looked less like a tragedy and more like everyone had just stepped out for a moment. Sarah walked over to one of the bedroom doors. "This was Lily's room," she said, her hand hovering over the knob. "According to the records, she roomed with a girl named Beth." "Let's just get your shots and go," I urged, the practical part of me screaming that this was a very, very bad idea. The air was getting colder. Sarah opened the door. The room was smaller. 2 beds, 2 desks. On one desk, textbooks were stacked neatly. On the other, a single, fat sociology book lay open, as if its reader had just paused. This was Lily's side. The air in here was thick with the smell of gardenias and cold ash. "No one's been here in 20 years, Mark muttered, his skepticism finally cracking. "So why does it smell like a florist's shop that burned down?" Jake panned his camera across the room. "This is gold, pure gold." That's when we heard it. A soft, rhythmic sound. Scritch, scritch, scritch. It was coming from the wall next to Lily's bed. We all froze. The sound was unmistakable. The sound of a match striking. Scritch, scritch. But there was no flare of light, no spark. Sarah, driven by a morbid curiosity, took a step closer. "Lily," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The scratching stopped. The silence that followed was heavier, more menacing. The temperature in the room plummeted. I could see my own breath. "Okay, that's it," I said, my voice shaking. "We're leaving now." Have you ever been so cold that it feels like your bones are made of ice? This was worse. This was a cold that felt intelligent, a cold that was watching us. And in that silence, you realize that being alone in the dark is one thing, but realizing you're not alone, that's when the real fear sets in. Make sure you're still with me, because what happened next, it changed us forever. We practically fell over each other getting out of the room, back into the common area. Jake was still filming, his camera light jerking wildly. "Did you hear that?" Sarah gasped, her face white. "She's here, she's really here." "It was pipes," Mark insisted, but he was backing toward the suite door, his eyes wide. "Just old pipes." That's when the door to the suite slammed shut with a force that shook the walls, not blown shut. Slammed. We were trapped. Panic erupted. Mark yanked on the doorknob. It didn't budge. Jake started yelling, pounding on the door. It was solid, heavy oak. No one would hear us. "The match," Sarah said, her voice eerily calm amidst the chaos. She was staring at Lily's bedroom door. "She wants us to see." "See what, Sarah? There's nothing in there," I cried, but Sarah was already walking back toward the bedroom, hypnotized. Jake, ever the documentarian, followed her with his camera. Mark and I had no choice but to follow. We stood in the doorway of Lily's room. The smell of gardenias was overpowering now, cloying and sickly sweet. Sarah struck a match from a book she carried in her pocket, a stupid, superstitious habit she had. The small flame pushed back the darkness, dancing on the wall. That's when we saw them. The scratches on the wall weren't random. They were words, words carved into the plaster over and over again by a frantic, desperate hand. Not alone, not alone, not alone, they left me, they left me, they left me. They left her, Sarah breathed, her eyes filling with tears. The other sisters, they got out and they left her. It's a story, Sarah, Mark shouted, his voice cracking. It's graffiti. Kids have been up here before us. But then the match in Sarah's hand flared, burning brighter, hotter than it should have. The flame turned an unnatural, icy blue, and in that blue light, we saw her, a figure, pale and shimmering, sitting at the desk. A young woman with long, dark hair, her head bent over the open book. She wasn't solid. You could see the wall through her, but she was there. Lily. She turned her head slowly. Her face was not the face of a victim. It was a mask of pure, undiluted rage. Her eyes were dark voids, and her mouth was open in a silent scream. Sarah dropped the match. The room plunged into blackness, and the screaming started, not from the ghost, from us. We scrambled backwards, a tangle of limbs and terror. Jake's camera light swept the room, and for a split second it illuminated the ghost, now standing, her arms outstretched, not in plea, but in accusation. The air filled with the roar of fire, the smell of burning hair and fabric. We could feel the heat. The suite door flew open with a splintering crack. We didn't look back. We ran. Down the haunted hallway, through the maintenance corridor, tumbling out into the bright, sterile, blessedly normal laundry room. We didn't stop running until we were outside, gasping in the cold, clean October air, the sounds of a living campus all around us. We huddled on a bench, shaking. We had seen it, all of us. There was no denying it anymore. She was so angry, Sarah sobbed. She wasn't sad, she was furious. Jake was reviewing the footage on his camera, his hands trembling. I got it. I got all of it. This is insane. But as he played it back, our hearts sank. The footage was there, but it was different. The audio was a mess of static. The figure at the desk was just a blur of light, easily dismissed as a lens flare. The words on the wall were barely visible. It was unconvincing. No one will believe us, Mark said, a hollow laugh escaping his lips. They'll think we're crazy or high. We made a pact. We would never speak of it again. We would bury the memory, the terror, deep down. We went back to our lives, but we were changed. We jumped at shadows. We avoided the 4th floor of Hemlock Hall. The smell of gardenias made us sick. That's the thing about the truth. Sometimes it's so terrible, so world-shattering, that the evidence refuses to be caught. It stays in the dark, with you, and you have to live with it alone. But the story doesn't end there. The real twist, the one that still haunts my every waking moment, came 2 weeks later. I was in the library trying to lose myself in textbooks when I saw her, Sarah. She was sitting alone at a table, staring at a microfiche reader. She looked gaunt, haunted. I had to know, Chloe, she said without looking up. I had to know the whole story. She'd spent days in the archives digging up everything she could about the fire, the official reports, the newspaper articles, the college disciplinary records. It never made sense, she whispered, her finger tracing a line on the screen. Why was Lily the only one who didn't make it? The fire started in the common area. Her room was the farthest away. She had the most time. What are you saying, Sarah? She turned to me, her eyes dead. The official report lists 4 survivors, Beth, Anna, Rachel, and Megan, the 4 Tri-Sig sisters. I know, I said. But look at this, she said, pulling up a scanned student roster from fall 1998. She pointed to the name next to Lily A.S. in room 505. It wasn't A.T. Beth. The roommate's name was Megan. My blood ran cold. So, One of the survivors was her roommate. She was in the room with Lily. Sarah shook her head, a terrible, understanding horror dawning on her face. No, Chloe. Look at the dorm roster for the entire floor. She pulled up another document. I scanned the list of names for room 505, Lily Johnson, Megan Wright. Then I looked at the list of survivors again. Beth, Anna, Rachel, and Megan. All 4 survivors got out, I said, confused. So Lily was alone. No, Sarah said, her voice a dry rasp. Read the fire department's incident log. The first responders forced the door to room 505. They found one victim, female, deceased. She highlighted a line on the microfiche screen. My eyes read the words, but my brain refused to process them. Condition of remains suggests victim was attempting to barricade the door from the inside using a heavy desk. I looked at Sarah. Barricade the door. Why would she barricade herself in? Sarah's next words flipped my world completely upside down. She wasn't barricading herself in, Chloe. She was trying to keep something out. She slid the final piece of evidence toward me. It was a scanned page from a campus police log, dated November 1st, 1998. A supplemental report. Witness statement from Ms. Bethany Cross, survivor, indicates that upon smelling smoke, the residents of Suite 505 attempted to evacuate. Ms. Cross states that the door to the hallway became jammed. She further claims that Ms. Megan Wright, in a state of panic, began screaming that Lily did this and that she won to let us out. The pieces clicked into place with a horrifying finality. The ghost we saw wasn't a victim left behind. She was the one who started the fire. The scratching on the wall wasn't a plea for help. It was a taunt. Not alone. She wasn't saying she was abandoned. She was telling the others they were trapped with her. The 4 sisters didn't just escape a fire. They escaped her. And we hadn't been visiting the ghost of a poor, tragic girl. We had been in the presence of a murderer, a spirit of pure malice that had tricked us, feeding on our sympathy, growing stronger from our belief in her victimhood. Think about the stories you've heard, the sad ghost girl, the weeping spirit. We feel sorry for them. We want to help them. But what if that's the trap? What if the most dangerous ghost isn't the one that screams, but the one that knows how to make you cry? The revelation that followed. It's the reason I still sleep with the lights on. We never went back. We never spoke of it again. Mark and Sarah broke up soon after, the shared trauma too heavy to bear. Jake dropped out of film school. He said he lost his taste for stories. As for me, I graduated. I'm in medical school now. I deal in facts, in science. But sometimes, late at night, when the hospital halls are quiet, I catch a scent, a faint trace of gardenia perfume from a visitor walking by. And I wonder, we sealed that door again, best we could. But a seal only works if what's on the other side wants to stay put. Lily didn't want to be left alone. She wanted an audience. She wanted her story told, but she's a liar. The 5th floor is still there, silent behind its wall, and every Halloween I drive past Blackwood College. I don't stop. I just look up at the dark windows of Hemlock Hall, and last year I saw it, a flicker, a single faint blue light in one of the 5th floor windows, just for a second. It wasn't a cry for help. It was a beacon. She's waiting, not for someone to set her free, but for someone new to invite inside. Maybe you know someone who loves a good ghost story. Maybe you've even shared this one. So I'll ask you, the next time you smell flowers where there shouldn't be any or feel a sudden, unexplained chill, what will you do? Will you feel sorry for the lonely ghost? Or will you remember Lily and you'll run? If you've made it this far, then you've felt the chill of Hemlock Hall. You've learned the truth they tried to wall up. But some truths have a way of getting out. If this story has haunted you, then share it. But be careful who you tell. You never know who might be listening. And if you think you're brave enough for more, then subscribe. But don't say I didn't warn you. Sweet dreams. The first thing I noticed was the locket. It was old, tarnished silver, lying right in the middle of the path like someone had dropped it just seconds before. The engraving was worn almost smooth, but I could just make it out. A weeping willow tree. I should have left it there. I should have listened to the part of my brain that screamed this was all wrong. But I didn't. I picked it up. The metal was ice cold, even in the desert heat. And as my fingers closed around it, I heard it, a faint, high-pitched giggle that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at all. That was the moment the world broke. And I'm the one who broke it. My name is Liam, and this isn't a campfire story. This is a warning. If you ever find yourself on Route 66, just outside the ghost town of Sand Creek, Arizona, and you see a sign for Willow Creek Campground, you keep driving. Don't stop for the strange beauty of the place. Don't stop for the ancient petroglyphs. And whatever you do, if you see a silver locket lying on the ground, for God's sake, don't pick it up. It was supposed to be the perfect trip. Me, my girlfriend Chloe, and our friends Mark and Jenna. 4 city kids escaping to the desert for a week of hiking, stargazing, and forgetting about student loans and dead-end jobs. I was the skeptic, the geology major who believed only in what he could dig up and carbon date. Chloe was the free spirit, the believer in energy and auras. Mark was our resident conspiracy theorist and survivalist, the secret holder who chosen this spot because of an old story he found on a dark web forum. And Jenna. Jenna was just along for the ride, the first to laugh, but also the first to feel a chill down her spine. We found the campground just as the sun was beginning to dip below the mesas. It was stunning. A dry creek bed snaked through a grove of twisted willow trees, their leaves a shocking, almost unnatural green against the red rock. And on a low bluff overlooking the creek was the cemetery. It wasn't a modern graveyard. It was a pioneer cemetery, forgotten by time. The wooden markers had long since rotted away, leaving only a few crumbling, sand-blasted tombstones tilting at crazy angles. One, in particular, caught my eye. It was a small grey stone, and carved at the top was the same weeping willow I'd later see on the locket. "Spooky," Jenna said, hugging herself. "Gives me the creeps." Mark grinned, pulling out his camera. "According to the stories, this is the place, the Willow Creek Cemetery. They say it only exists when the sun is up." "Come on, man," I laughed, slapping him on the back. "It's a pile of rocks. It exists just fine." Chloe, however, was quiet. She was staring at the grove of trees, her brow furrowed. "The energy here is fractured, like a broken mirror. There's a sadness, a deep, old sadness." We set up camp 100 yards away, just as the last light bled from the sky. The night was incredibly dark and silent, the kind of silence that has weight. We built a fire, cooked dinner, and laughed too loudly, trying to fill the emptiness. That's when Mark brought out the story. He called it The Legend of the Weeping Girl. "Back in the 1880s, he began, his voice dropping to a dramatic whisper, "a family of settlers tried to farm this land. They had a daughter, Eliza, maybe 7 or 8 years old. She had a silver locket, her most prized possession. During a terrible drought, a sickness swept through their camp. Eliza was the last to die. They buried her right up there." He gestured with his chin towards the bluff. "But they were so poor, they couldn't afford a proper stone. So her father carved a willow tree into a piece of rock because she loved to play by the creek." Jenna rolled her eyes. "Okay, sad story, but where's the ghost part?" "The story goes," Mark continued, "that Eliza doesn't know she's dead. She thinks her family just left her, so she waits. She appears to travelers, crying, asking if they've seen her mommy and daddy, and if you show her kindness, if you try to help her, she latches onto you, she follows you home, and she brings the drought with her." I scoffed. "A ghost that causes drought? That's a new one." Pretty convenient for a desert, don't you think? Chloe shushed me. Don't mock it, Liam. Energy is energy. A sorrow that strong, it can leave a stain. Later, when Chloe and Jenna had turned in, I needed to relieve myself. I walked away from the circle of firelight towards the creek bed. The moon was a sliver, offering little light. That's when I saw it. A glint of silver. The locket. It was lying at the base of a willow tree, its chain tangled in the roots. The weeping willow engraving was clear as day. My rational mind kicked in. A tourist dropped it, that's all. I reached down and untangled it. The metal was so cold it felt wet, and that's when I heard the giggle, a child's giggle, light and airy, but it echoed in the stillness, making the hairs on my arms stand up. I spun around, nothing but shadows. I shoved the locket in my pocket and hurried back to the tent, telling myself it was the wind, but the desert was dead calm. Have you ever held something that felt wrong? Not broken, not dirty, but just fundamentally incorrect? An object that feels like a hole in the world? That locket was like holding a piece of absolute zero, and that giggle in the dead silence of the desert night. If you heard that, what would you have done? Would you have thrown it away? Or would you have done what I did? If your curiosity is piqued, then buckle up. The terror is just beginning. The next morning, I told the others about the locket, leaving out the giggle. Mark's eyes went wide. Dude, that's it. That's her locket. You have to put it back. Relax, Indiana Jones, I said, holding it up. It's a piece of jewelry. Probably fell off some hiker's neck last week. But when Chloe saw it, she recoiled. Liam, get rid of it now. There's a darkness around that thing. It's hungry. I laughed it off, but a part of me felt a chill. To prove a point, I decided we'd go back to the cemetery. In the bright light of day, it would just be a sad old graveyard, nothing more. We packed up our water and hiked the short distance to the bluff. The sun was brutal, baking the red rock. When we reached the top, we all stopped. The cemetery was gone, not overgrown, not hidden. Gone. Where the tilting stones had been was just flat, hard-packed earth and scrub brush. There was no sign that anyone had ever been buried there. It was as if we had collectively hallucinated the entire thing. Told you, Mark whispered, his face pale. It only exists in the daylight. That's impossible, I insisted, my geological mind reeling. Graveyards don't just vanish. Erosion, vandalism, but not this. This is real, Liam, Chloe said, her voice trembling. And you took something from a place that doesn't exist at night. You need to put it back. Right here, right where we're standing. Feeling foolish, but with a growing knot of dread in my stomach, I took the locket from my pocket. I knelt down and placed it on the ground where I estimated the little girl's grave should be. The second it left my fingers, a wave of heat washed over us. It was so intense it felt like opening an oven door. The air shimmered, and from the grove of willow trees below, we heard a sound that froze the blood in our veins. Not a giggle, a low, rattling hiss. We turned as one. There, coiled in the shade of the very tree where I'd found the locket, was a snake. But it was all wrong. It was a western diamondback, but it was jet black, and color I'd never seen in nature. It was thick as my forearm, and its rattle was a dry, furious buzz that seemed to vibrate in my bones. It's a rattler, Jenna said, her voice tight with fear. Just back away slowly. But the snake didn't move. It just watched us, its tongue flicking out, tasting the air. It wasn't acting like a snake, it was standing guard. We backed away slowly, never taking our eyes off it, until we were over the bluff and out of sight. We ran back to camp, our hearts pounding. That was no coincidence, Chloe gasped, grabbing my arm. That was a warning. She doesn't want the locket back on her grave. She wants it with you. I checked my pocket, my blood running cold. The locket was there. I hadn't put it back on the ground at all. In my fear of the snake, I must have clutched it without thinking. What would you do? You've been given a warning you can't explain. You're holding on to something that shouldn't exist. Do you try to get rid of it again? Or do you, like I did, make the fatal mistake of thinking you can control it? The deeper we go, the darker this gets. Make sure you're still with me, because what happened when we got home, that's when the real haunting began. The rest of the trip was tense. We packed up and left a day early. The drive home to Tucson was silent. The locket was in my backpack, and I could feel its weight, a cold spot against my spine. At first, nothing happened. Life returned to normal. Classes, work, parties. I kept the locket in a drawer, a weird souvenir. I almost convinced myself it was nothing. Then the dreams started. I'd be in my apartment playing my guitar, a beat-up old acoustic I'd had since high school. I'd look over, and a figure would be standing in the corner of the room. A little girl, made of what looked like grey ash, like a column of smoke, vaguely shaped like a person. She'd just watch me. In the dream, I'd try to speak, to play a chord, but my fingers would be heavy and useless. I'd wake up gasping, the room freezing cold. I told Chloe. She looked at me with pure fear. "It's her, Liam. She's here. You have to get rid of that locket, not just throw it away. You have to return it to the creek bed at night. You have to give it back to her on her terms." But I was stubborn. "It's just stress, Chloe. Bad tacos." Then came the night. Everything changed. I was in my room, trying to practice a new song. It was around 9 p.m. I'd been feeling strange all day, detached like I was watching my life through a foggy window. My body felt heavy, my movements sluggish. I was strumming, but the chords sounded discordant, wrong. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my mom standing in the doorway to my room. She was just watching me, a sad expression on her face. Why isn't she saying anything? I thought, but I couldn't stop playing. My fingers were moving on their own, pressing down on the strings until my fingertips were raw. Then a knock on my bedroom door. I turned my head. My mom was there, holding a plate of cookies, a cheerful smile on her face. "I thought you might be hungry, sweetie." I looked back to the doorway where I'd just seen her. It was empty. A cold terror seized me. I was looking at two places at once. I tried to stand, but I couldn't. It was like I was locked in my own body. The guitar felt like it was welded to my hands. The next thing I knew, I was on my feet. I wasn't in control. I was a passenger. I watched my own hands raise the guitar high above my head. I saw the horror on my mom's face. I heard a scream that didn't sound like my voice. It was thin, reedy, the voice of a terrified child. I brought the guitar down on the edge of my desk with a sickening crack of wood and the twang of snapping strings, again and again until it was in two pieces. Then, like a switch being flipped, it was over. I collapsed to my knees, gasping, my hands bleeding. The room was a wreck. My mom was crying, kneeling beside me. "Liam, your voice! What's wrong with your voice?" When I spoke, my voice was my own. But she told me that when I was screaming, it was the voice of a little girl. Imagine that, losing control of your own body, being a spectator to your own violence. It's the most violating feeling in the world. And the worst part? Knowing that something else is in the driver's seat. Something that hates you. What happens next will change your understanding of what a ghost truly is. Don't look away. After that, there was no more denial. Mark, Chloe, and Jenna helped me research. We dug through historical archives, old newspaper clippings. The legend of the Weeping Girl was just a story, but we found a kernel of truth. In 1888, a settlement named Willow Creek did fail due to drought and disease, and a young girl named Eliza Miller did die. But the story was wrong. She wasn't the last to die, she was the first. The records showed a frantic, terrified community. They didn't just bury her. They performed a ritual. They bound her body with silver, a locket and a chain, and buried her facing away from the rising sun, a practice used in some folklore to prevent a spirit from rising. They weren't mourning a daughter, they were imprisoning a monster. They believed Eliza wasn't a victim of the drought, she was the cause. A child born with a dry soul, a creature of thirst that fed on life and water. The ghost wasn't a sad little girl looking for her parents. It was a parasitic entity that used the form of a child to evoke sympathy, to get close to its victims. It didn't bring the drought. It fed on the essence of life itself, leaving behind a spiritual desiccation. The disappearing cemetery wasn't her tragedy. It was her prison, and by taking the locket, I hadn't just taken a souvenir. I had broken the lock on her cell. The snake? A manifestation of her true nature. Not a guardian, but a sentry for its master, a venomous predatory thing. The giggle wasn't playful, it was triumphant. Think about every ghost story you've ever heard. The weeping woman, the lonely child. We're programmed to feel pity. But what if that's the trap? What if the most dangerous ghosts aren't the ones that scream, but the ones that know how to make you cry? The revelation that followed is the reason I now sleep with the lights on. We drove back to Sand Creek. It was midnight. The desert was freezing. We hiked to the dry creek bed, the beam of our flashlight the only light in a sea of black. I held the broken pieces of my guitar and the locket. The cemetery was, of course, absent, but we could feel her. The air was bone dry, sucking the moisture from our mouths. The willows stood silent, their leaves still. I placed the locket and the shattered guitar on the ground where I had found it. "Eliza," I whispered, my voice cracking, "we're giving it back. Leave us alone." For a moment, nothing. Then the air grew even colder. The grey, ashy figure of the girl materialized under the willow tree. But this time she wasn't giggling or crying. She was smiling. A wide, terrible smile that held no joy, only an ancient, bottomless hunger. She didn't look at the locket. She looked directly at me. And then she was gone. The locket was gone too, but the guitar pieces remained. We ran. We drove through the night and never looked back. I thought it was over. For a few weeks it seemed like it was. The dreams stopped. The heaviness lifted. Then, yesterday, I was cleaning my room. I moved my bed to vacuum underneath, and there, lying in the dust, was the locket. The silver was bright and shiny, as if it were brand new. The weeping willow engraving was deep and clear, and as I stared at it, frozen in horror, I heard it again. Not a giggle, not a cry. A single clear whispered word that slithered into my ear from right behind me. Home. She's not trapped in the desert anymore. She never wanted to go back. The locket was just the key. I was the door. And now she's home. The haunting didn't end. It just changed addresses. If you're listening to this, be careful what you bring back from your travels. A rock, a seashell, an old piece of jewelry. Sometimes the most dangerous souvenirs aren't the ones that can break. They're the ones that can't. If this story has made you look twice at the trinkets on your shelf, then share it. But be careful. You never know what might be listening. And if you think you're brave enough for more tales from the edge, you know what to do. But don't say I didn't warn you. Sweet dreams. The first thing that vanished was the sound of the crickets. One moment the Utah night was a vibrant chorus of life. The next, it was a vacuum of silence, so absolute I could hear the blood pulsing in my ears. And then, through the windshield, we saw it. A single weathered tombstone, glowing faintly in the moonlight, standing alone in the scrubland where nothing had been just seconds before. It hadn't appeared. It had simply decided to be seen. That was our first mistake, stopping the car. My name is Ben, and if you're ever driving down State Route 14 through the high desert of Utah, past the town of Cedar Creek, do me a favor. When you see the sign for Red Rock Canyon Campground, you ignore it. You put your foot on the accelerator, you lock your doors, and you don't look in the rearview mirror. Because what's out there isn't just sand and stone. It's a place that exists on its own terms, and it doesn't like visitors. This was supposed to be the trip that saved our friendship. Me, the pragmatic one, the guy who planned everything. My wife, Sarah, the intuitive artist who felt energies and saw patterns in everything. And our two oldest friends, Leo, the adrenaline junkie and conspiracy theorist who always knew a secret spot, and his girlfriend, Maya, the level-headed history teacher who was the only one who could talk him down from a ledge. Leo had found the campground on some obscure blog. It's pristine, man, untouched, no RVs, no generators, just pure desert. He was right. It was beautiful in a stark, brutal way. Red sandstone cliffs carved by millennia of wind, juniper trees clinging to life in the dry soil. And on the way in, just a mile from the turnoff, we passed it. The cemetery. It was unlike any graveyard I'd ever seen. The markers weren't neat rows of marble. They were rough-hewn slabs of red sandstone, stacked and piled, some so old they were little more than mounds. A gnarled, ancient juniper tree had grown right through the center of one, its roots entwining the stone like bony fingers. It was beautiful and deeply unsettling. "Whoa," Maya said, leaning forward from the back seat. "That's a pioneer cemetery, 1800s. Look at the wear on those stones. They must have had a hell of a time trying to farm out here." "Spooky," Sarah murmured, her nose almost pressed to the window. "There's a sadness here, a deep old silence." I just shrugged. It's history. Harsh land, harsh lives. We set up camp as the sun dipped below the cliffs, painting the sky in shades of violet and orange. The silence was immediate, a physical presence after the city's constant hum. We built a fire, cracked open beers, and for a few hours, it was perfect. The tension that had been brewing between us all year seemed to melt away in the desert heat. It was on our way back from a late-night beer run to the lone gas station in Cedar Creek that things got weird. Leo was driving my SUV. "Hey, Ben," he said, slowing down. "Wasn't that cemetery right about here?" I looked out the window. We were at the exact stretch of road, but where the haunting pioneer graveyard had been, there was now only flat, empty desert, silvered by the headlights. "You missed the turnoff, man," I said, a knot of unease tightening in my stomach. "No way," Leo insisted, pulling over onto the gravel shoulder. "This is it. I remember that weird lightning-struck tree right there." He pointed to a skeletal juniper. We all got out. The night was cold and vast. I clicked on my high beams, sweeping the light across the barren landscape. Nothing. No stones, no mounds, no tree growing from a grave. It was just empty. "Okay, that's seriously weird," Maya admitted, hugging herself against the chill. "I took photos of it this afternoon. I know this was the spot." Sarah was quiet, standing a few feet away from us, her eyes closed. "It's not gone," she whispered. "It's just asleep." We drove back to camp, a confused silence hanging over us. The next morning, fueled by coffee and daylight courage, we drove back. And there it was. The cemetery, exactly as it had been the day before, the juniper tree spearing through the central grave, the stones looking even older in the harsh morning sun. "See," Leo said, triumphant. "We just couldn't see it in the dark." But that made no sense. My high beams should have illuminated it. The stones were right there. "That's not how light works, Leo," I said, my scientific mind rebelling. "This is impossible." "What would you have done? Written it off as a trick of the night? Or would that little voice in the back of your head, the one that knows when the world doesn't add up, start screaming? That voice is the only thing that might have saved us. If you're feeling that chill of wrongness, then you're already with me. And trust me, this is just the beginning." That night, I became obsessed. I had to prove it. I had to document the phenomenon. "We're going back," I announced after dinner. "We're going to watch it disappear." Sarah looked terrified. Ben, no, this feels like poking a bear. Some places, they just want to be left alone. It's a geographic anomaly, Sarah. Maybe a thermal inversion, a mirage effect. I need to see it. Leo, of course, was all in. Maya reluctantly agreed to come for supervision. Sarah refused to stay at camp alone, so she joined us, sitting silently in the passenger seat, her knuckles white. We parked at the same pull-off at 11 p.m. The desert was a black canvas, the only light coming from a sliver of moon and our headlights. We all got out, armed with flashlights and cameras. We stood at the edge of the road, staring at the spot. "Okay," I said, my voice too loud in the silence. "It should be right there." We trained our flashlight beams on the coordinates I'd logged on my phone. The light illuminated scrub brush, red dirt, and the same skeletal juniper, but no cemetery. "See?" Leo said. "Gone." But Maya took a step forward, her flashlight beam trembling slightly. "Wait a minute. Leo, point your light at the base of that tree." Leo did. There, nestled in the dust and rocks, was a single small object, a child's leather shoe crumbling with age, the leather sun-bleached and cracked. It was so small. "How did we miss that yesterday?" I wondered aloud. "We didn't," Sarah said, her voice hollow. "It wasn't there yesterday." A cold dread, colder than the desert night, washed over me. She was right. This was new. This was a message. There's a moment in every horror story where the curiosity turns to fear, where the intellectual puzzle becomes a personal threat. For me, it was that shoe. It was so small, so innocuous, but it felt like a hook, and we were the fish. The deeper we go, the darker this gets. Make sure you're still with us. We retreated to the car, our bravado gone. The drive back to camp was tense. Nobody spoke. When we arrived, something was wrong. Our campfire, which we'd let die down to embers, was now a roaring blaze, and sitting on the log beside it, rocking back and forth, was a figure. It was an old man, so withered and lean he seemed carved from the desert itself. His skin was like tanned leather, and he wore a dusty cowboy hat pulled low over his eyes. We hadn't heard a car approach. "Evening," he drawled, not looking up. His voice was like the rustle of dry leaves. "Y'all been out to the seeing place, I reckon." We stood frozen a few yards away. Leo found his voice first. "Who are you?" "The caretaker," the old man said, finally lifting his head. His eyes were pale, almost milky. "Ain't had much to care for in a long time. Till now." "The cemetery?" I asked. "What is it? Why can we only see it during the day?" The old man spat into the fire. "It ain't a cemetery, not in the way you think. That there is a prison." The word hung in the air. A prison. The folks buried there, they weren't pioneers. They were the guards, he continued, his milky eyes fixed on the flames. Back when the tribe still roamed free, they found something out here in the rocks, something hungry, something that wore the skin of the land. It couldn't be killed, so it was bound. Bound under stone, under ritual. The guards stayed, lived and died on that spot, their spirits chained to the earth to keep the seal strong. The grave markers, they ain't headstones. They're bars on a cell. Sarah let out a small sob. The shoe. The old man nodded slowly. The thing inside, it likes to play tricks. It shows you what you want to see. A lost child's shoe, a crying voice. It feeds on attention, on curiosity. Every time you look for it, you weaken the bars. The daylight, that's when the bars are strongest. The night, that's when it tries to pick the lock. He stood up, his joints cracking. You folks should leave, first light. You've already knocked. It'd be rude to wait around for an answer. And with that, he simply walked past us and melted into the darkness beyond the firelight. We heard no footsteps, no car engine. He was just gone. We didn't sleep. We sat huddled around the fire, watching the shadows, jumping at every coyote yip. We were packed and in the car before the sun even crested the cliffs. You hear a story like that from a stranger in the desert, and your whole world view shatters. A cemetery that's a prison, ghosts that are wardens. It sounds like a campfire tale, but what if it's not? What happens next will shock you. Don't look away. We thought we were safe once we hit the highway. We were wrong. 100 miles down the road, we stopped for gas. I was filling the tank when my phone buzzed. It was a photo from Maya sent to our group chat. It was a picture she'd taken on her DSLR the first day, a beautiful shot of the cemetery at sunset. She'd written, "Guys, zoom in on the central grave, the one with the tree." My heart hammering, I opened the photo and pinched to zoom. The image was high resolution. I focused on the rough-hewn stone at the base of the juniper tree. The weathering I had seen wasn't random. It was a carving, worn almost smooth by time, but unmistakable once you saw it. It wasn't a name or a date. It was a crude, terrified face, its mouth open in a silent scream. And behind it, emerging from the stone, was another shape, something sinuous and limbless, with empty sockets for eyes. The warden and the prisoner. The text message from Maya came through a second later. "I didn't see this when I took the picture. I just saw it now." We drove the rest of the way home in a petrified silence. The relief of being back in the city was immense. The noise, the lights, the people, it felt like a shield. We tried to laugh it off, a shared hallucination, a desert mirage fueled by suggestion, but the city couldn't keep it out. A week later, I was taking out the trash. I live in a suburban neighborhood with small, neatly manicured yards. As I walked back up the driveway, I saw something in the grass near my porch, a small, dark shape. I walked closer, my blood turning to ice. It was a child's leather shoe, crumbling with age, identical to the one we saw in the desert. I looked up, my eyes scanning the quiet street, and there, under the streetlight on the corner, stood the withered old man. His cowboy hat was pulled low, but I could feel his milky eyes on me. He didn't move. He just stood there, a solitary figure in the unnatural orange glow. Then he raised one bony hand and pointed, not at me, at my house. I stumbled inside, locking the door behind me, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I rushed to the window and looked out. The streetlight was empty. He was gone. But on my perfectly manicured lawn, where he had been standing, the grass was dead, a perfect foot-shaped patch of brittle brown turf. He wasn't a caretaker. He was a warning, a spectral bailiff. He wasn't telling us to leave the desert. He was telling us we'd already served the papers. We had initiated the eviction, and the tenant was coming to collect its new home. The cemetery wasn't the prison anymore. We were. So I'll ask you, the next time you were driving at night and you see something strange on the side of the road, a flickering light, a shadow that moves too fast, what will you do? Will you stop? Or will you remember the story of the prison made of stone and you'll keep driving? If this tale has made you look twice at the empty lot at the end of your street, then share it. But be careful. You never know what might be listening from the other side of the bars. If you think you're brave enough for more, you know what to do. But don't say I didn't warn you. The last thing I remember clearly is the sound of my own voice, but it wasn't mine. It was thin, reedy, a little girl's voice coming from my throat, singing a nursery rhyme I'd never heard before. My girlfriend, Chloe, was backed into the corner of our apartment, her eyes wide with the terror I'd put there. And in my hands, I held the two splintered halves of my favorite guitar. I had no memory of breaking it. The doctors called it a fugue state, temporary psychosis brought on by stress. But I know what it really was. It was an eviction. Something was trying to push me out of my own body, and it all started with a stupid, beautiful guitar I never should have bought. My name is Alex. And if you've ever bought something second-hand, a piece of furniture, a jacket, a record, from a place that felt a little off, listen closely, because objects can be anchors, and sometimes what they're anchoring isn't a memory, it's a passenger. I've always been a magnet for weird energy, not in a I see dead people way. More like a human lightning rod for static. If there's a haunted history in a room, I'll get a headache. If someone's lying to me, I feel a pressure in my chest. Chloe calls it empathy. I call it a curse. I found the guitar at a dusty antique shop in a forgotten Arizona town called Dustville. We were on a road trip, me, Chloe, and our buddy Mark, the guitar was an old, sunburst acoustic hanging on the wall. It was gorgeous. The wood had a deep, warm glow. The price tag was suspiciously low. The shop owner, a man with eyes like dried-up riverbeds, saw me looking. "That one's got a history," he said, a little too casually. "Belonged to a singer back in the 60s, Jody Maxwell, local legend. Had a voice like an angel, they say, until she vanished." Mark, our resident skeptic and aspiring filmmaker, nudged me. "Dude, that's a story to sell guitars. It's probably just warped." But I was hooked. I strummed a chord. The sound was rich, resonant, and sent a shiver down my spine. It felt alive. Against my better judgment and Chloe's uneasy silence, I bought it. The first sign was the dream. 2 nights after we got back to our apartment in Portland, I was being chased, not by a monster, but by a feeling, a crushing, suffocating sadness. I'd run through endless grey corridors, and every time I looked back, there was nothing there. Just the feeling getting closer. I woke up gasping just before dawn, the room freezing cold. The guitar was leaning against the wall in the corner, and for a split second, I thought I saw a wisp of grey smoke, like ash, curling from the sound hole. I wrote it off as a hypnagogic jerk, waking dream stuff. But it kept happening. Every night, the same dream, the same cold wake-up. And the grey, ashy smoke became a figure, a small, slender figure of a young woman, her features blurred like a smudged charcoal drawing. She'd emerge from the guitar and just stand at the foot of my bed, watching me. I told Chloe, "She's the believer, the one who burns sage after we argue and reads tarot cards for fun." Her face went pale. "It's attached to the guitar, Alex. Jody Maxwell. She's not at rest." "It's a story, Chloe," I insisted, the skeptic in me fighting a losing battle. "It's stress. I've got that big project at work." But the heaviness got worse. It was a physical weight on my shoulders, a fog in my head. I'd be typing an email and suddenly forget the word for meeting. I'd feel like I was moving through water. Then came the night I lost time. It was a Tuesday. I'd gotten home from work late, around 8:30, feeling that familiar, crushing fatigue. Chloe was out with friends. To relax, I picked up the guitar. It was the only thing that seemed to calm the static in my head. I started playing, simple chords, my eyes closed, and then I felt it, a presence, behind me and to the left. I knew with a certainty that chilled my blood that it was my mother. I could feel her maternal energy, a specific warmth I'd know anywhere. But why was she just standing there? Why wasn't she saying anything? "It's fine," I thought, my fingers still moving clumsily over the strings. "I'm just tired. Keep playing." Then a sharp knock on my bedroom door. I turned my head. The door opened, and there was my mum, holding a plate of cookies, a warm smile on her face. "I thought you might be hungry, honey." I snapped my head back to the left. The space was empty. The feeling of her presence was gone. A wave of disorientation hit me so hard I felt nauseous. I had just felt her there. I was sure of it. That's when everything went black. Have you ever had that feeling? The unshakable certainty that someone is standing right behind you. You can feel the shift in the air, the pressure of their gaze. Now imagine turning around and seeing nothing. But the feeling doesn't go away. It gets stronger. If that thought makes your skin crawl, then you're starting to understand what I went through. Stay with me. This is where the nightmare truly begins. The next thing I knew, I was on my feet. I was a passenger in my own body. I could see my hands, but I wasn't controlling them. I watched them raise the beautiful sunburst guitar high above my head. I saw the horror on my mum's face, the plate of cookies shattering on the floor. I heard a scream, a high, terrified, feminine scream that was coming from my mouth, but it wasn't my voice. Then I brought the guitar down on the corner of my desk. The sound was awful. A sickening crack of wood, the discordant twang of strings snapping. I swung it again and again, until the guitar was in two jagged pieces in my hands. Then the pressure lifted, like a switch had been flipped. I collapsed to my knees, gasping, my hands bleeding from the splintered wood. My mum was crying, kneeling beside me, shaking me. "Alex, Alex, talk to me! Your voice! What happened to your voice?" When I finally found my breath, my voice was my own. But she told me that when I was screaming, it was the voice of a young girl. The doctors found nothing, no seizures, no neurological damage. Dissociative episode, they said, extreme stress. But Chloe and I knew. Mark, when we told him, finally stopped being a skeptic. He helped us research Jody Maxwell. The story the shop owner told was a lie. Jody Maxwell wasn't a local legend with a voice like an angel. She was a footnote, a talented but troubled teenager in the 60s who dreamed of being a folk singer. She was also a known sleepwalker. One night, she vanished. The official report suggested she wandered off into the desert during an episode and succumbed to the elements, but the town whispers were darker. They said she'd been dabbling in things she shouldn't have, trying to use rituals to make her voice more powerful. They said she'd invited something in. We found an old, scanned newspaper article from 1967. The headline read, "Missing Girl's Belongings Auctioned." The photo showed a pile of her things, and right there on top was the sunburst acoustic guitar. She hadn't just owned the guitar. It was the vessel for her ambition and for whatever she'd summoned. You think you know how a ghost story works. A tragic death, a restless spirit. But what if the ghost isn't the point? What if it's just the symptom? The deeper we dug, the darker the truth became. This wasn't about a ghost wanting peace. This was about something else wanting a home. Make sure you're still with us, because what we learned next changes everything. We took the broken guitar to a woman Chloe knew, a psychic who ran a crystal shop in the Hawthorne district. The moment we brought the pieces in, she recoiled. "You need to get that out of here," she said, her voice tight. "There's nothing of the girl left in that wood. It's just a hole, a doorway, and something is using it to climb through. It's mimicking her, using your sympathy, your fascination to get closer to you. It's not her spirit haunting the guitar. The guitar is the haunt. It's a tool." The twist hit me like a physical blow. The grey, ashy figure wasn't Jody Maxwell. It was a mask. The thing inside was pretending to be a tragic young girl to lower my defenses. It fed on my creativity, my energy, my very sense of self. The fugue state wasn't me blacking out. It was the thing trying on my body, testing the controls, while it pushed my consciousness into the corner. It didn't want to communicate. It wanted to occupy. We did what she said. We drove out to the coast, to a remote cliffside, and we threw the pieces of the guitar into the roaring Pacific. We said a prayer. We felt a momentary sense of relief. For a few weeks it worked. The dream stopped, the heaviness lifted. I felt like myself again. Then I decided to clean my home office, to get rid of the last remnants of the bad energy. I moved my bookcase to vacuum behind it, and there, tucked against the baseboard, was a single high E string. It was from the sunburst guitar. It must have snapped off and flown across the room when I destroyed it. I picked it up. The metal was ice cold. And from the hallway, I heard it, a faint, simple melody being hummed, the same nursery rhyme I'd screamed in that alien voice. I spun around. The hallway was empty, but the humming continued, now sounding like it was coming from just behind my right ear. I dropped the string and ran out of the apartment. I haven't been back. I'm staying with Mark now, but it's no use. The thing wasn't anchored to the guitar. Not really. The guitar was just its key. I was the lock it turned, and now the door is open. The heaviness is returning. This morning, I cut myself shaving. I watched my hand in the mirror, and for a second, it didn't feel like my hand. It felt like a tool I was borrowing. I've started having the dream again. The grey, ashy figure is there. But she's not emerging from a guitar anymore. She's emerging from the mirror, from me. I'm writing this down as a warning. It's not about the object you bring home. It's about the emptiness inside you that the object fills. That thing, whatever it is, didn't want the guitar. It wanted a singer, it wanted a voice, and now it has mine. So the next time you find a bargain that seems too good to be true, ask yourself why. Ask what price the last owner really paid. If this story has made you look twice at the old trunk in your attic or the vintage dress in your closet, then share it. But be careful. Curiosity isn't just dangerous for the cat. It's dangerous for everyone the cat lives with. If you think you're brave enough for more tales from the edge, you know what to do. But don't say I didn't warn you.